Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. If you are both a viewer of this show and a listener to my podcast with Lee Camp, Common Censored, you will recall that we very recently covered the news that, of all entities, JP Morgan Chase has announced the date for the next financial crisis, 2020. So, much like the idea of a serial killer announcing that the next round of murders will take place in roughly a year and a half, one can't help but wonder, why? Not so much why they're a killer, because that would require a much deeper social and psychological analysis that really delves into the depths of mental health in our mentally and emotionally oppressive and repressive society. And we don't really have time for that right now, so not so much why they're a killer, but why we let them be. Why do we let giants like JP Morgan Chase, a behemoth bank that made bank on the 2008 recession, announce that they're going to do it again, so everyone get ready? That is really twisted. Of course, capitalism's fan base will say, oh, but that's just how it is. I mean, we have booms and we have busts. Okay, but first of all, why? No, really, why do you build a society on such a flimsy system that demands a 10-year cycle of deep economic pain that only further oppresses and marginalizes the most vulnerable? And secondly, you don't actually have booms and busts. What you have is busts, flat lines, and then more busts. Since the 2008 bank bailouts, any semblance of a boom has gone straight to the fuckwits who pushed us into this mess in the first place, giant financial institutions and the richest of the rich. It therefore followed that income inequality grew and continues to grow, thanks to a wide array of other factors, from wage stagnation to tax cuts for the wealthiest to further Wall Street regulation cuts to doomed to fail austerity measures. Indeed, income inequality has returned to levels last seen in the 1820s. As the saying goes, public policy, private pain. And while we can trace today's suffering back to 2008, it actually goes back further. Financialization is a term given to the expansion of financial markets and motives that hold an unprecedented influence on our daily lives, from nature to the household to global economies. Everything's for sale. Everything has a price. So let's sell. In other words, financialization means deregulating institutions like JP Morgan Chase, whose sole purpose is profit. People and planet be damned. Back in the day, our hugely unnecessary and overstretched spending on such fiascos as the Cold War and Vietnam far surpassed the amount of gold that we had that was at the time an anchor for our currency. Known as the Bretton Woods Agreement, this gold standard served as a make good on our investments and our spending. But in 1971, we decided to cut loose and adopt a fiat currency, which we still have today. And since 1971, our previously fettered capitalism has been raging, unchained and unhinged. Neoliberal free market fancies were the chic new trend, complete with floating exchange rates, free, i.e. corporatized trade, deregulation, speculation, and the free movement of capital. To put it another way, we play with a lot more money than we actually have and can pay for, as shown in this graphic. The gray represents global GDP, and the green represents global financial assets, or the money played with via transactions. As time went on from that 1971 gilded breakup, the value of global financial transactions rapidly surpassed that of real production business and commerce. The rise in computing technology meant that trillions of dollars could be moved around without ever actually moving a physical dollar, just ones and zeros on a screen. Banks no longer work in the paradigm of personal loans and savings. They're gambling centers that repackage, sell, and trade in loans. Furthermore, the shadow banking system, or SBS, so-called due to its role as an unofficial, thereby totally unregulated banking institutions, has grown significantly since 2008 and accounts for $160 trillion in assets worldwide, almost half of the $340 trillion of total financial assets globally. Already in 2014, the consulting firm McKinsey's estimated world debt stood at $199 trillion, 287% of global GDP. And that impossible debt rests on our shoulders because financialization isn't just about runaway spending, but runaway accumulation. An accumulation that never trickles down, but always robs from below. Research has shown that financialization has increased inequality, slowed down investment in real production, mounted pressures on indebted households and individuals, and led to a decline in democratic accountability. A capitalist system that, by definition, puts capital above all else, has wrought our bust and bust system, driven by unanchored markets that are accountable to no one but their stockholders, who use us as a buffer. A new billionaire is created every second day. Every second day. And here we are looking to JP Morgan Chase to light our way through the next crash. I don't have a crystal ball, but I feel pretty confident in saying that there's no light at the end of that tunnel. But hey, I'm not all about the doom and gloom. There is, of course, a way to brighten our future, to make the inevitable collapse of capitalism a just transition towards people and planet over profit. And it has a lot to do with understanding our enemy and approaching them realistically. How are we to address a global, borderless, financialized system unless we, too, consider ourselves borderless? Unless we see ourselves mirrored in those fighting and building thousands of miles away? In the same breath, how are we to start? We can't possibly start on a global scale. That doesn't make sense. We have to start locally. We have to start where we're at, with who's around us, with what we've got. Consider the growing global network of municipalist organizing that we talked about back in episode 159. Building on local levels while also connecting struggles and sharing tactics on a global scale. This combination of local focus with broad reach is vital. Such efforts will demand solidarity rather than charity, the shifting of power, the shifting of control over resources, and some honestly uncomfortable paradigm and life shifts that threaten the comfortable lives of some at the expense of many. Oftentimes, our thinking is stuck in an anchored gold standard world where there were limits to greed and borders mattered more. But that just isn't the case anymore. And we have to think, live, and act in our place in time, directly targeting and fighting the institutions that oppress and subjugate us. At a risk of sounding overly dramatic, this is honestly our only hope.